Questions? As I listened to the discussion, I know this was driven in part by the fact that such a substantial part of the populations in these areas are on free and reduced school lunch, and so when school's out, this becomes a much more significant issue.
This is maybe a question more for Monique. Thinking about and noting that several of the current summer feeding programs are actually coordinated by the cities, was there a conversation about making the accountable bodies the cities, the county, or county-related funds or departments that may need to fund organizations to do this work?
They have been named, and so how Commissioner James Hatter and her working group have been operationalizing this. They've been taking on each level, so they have public policy recommendations, institutional systems, organizational practices, and then individual contributions. And so they did name it, especially when we're looking at policy recommendations. They called out those bodies. For this one in particular, I think there's an opportunity to add them because they've been part of conversation. But right now, it was broad. It was regional food banks and broadly noted capacity building organizations. I think there's an opportunity to add, and I would assume that that commissioners would be amendable to it if we did want to make an amendment.
I would offer an amendment to add the departments, particularly since you're talking about the North County area, to add the St. Louis County and its relative departments. That may be Human Services, that may be Health, and those municipalities that have capacity and responsibility for young people in their respective communities as well. So I would add those to the accountable bodies.
Under accountable bodies, St. Louis County and municipalities.
Yes.
Okay.
What conversation occurred around coordination with schools? Here's why I ask. So given that a number of parents and guardians actually are inspired to enroll their children in summer school for enrichment simply because there is free breakfast and lunch, what is the conversation about ensuring that if a summer food program is now available, that doesn't adversely affect students who would then not choose to enroll in summer enrichment programs at schools because they can get the food elsewhere? So how has that been discussed?
So when we looked at regional food banks, and maybe this isn't properly represented, but that was inclusive of those school programs. Now, based on the conversations they've had, because what they've done is, and this is for everyone's understanding, is that, so there are conversations that happen in the working group, but there are also conversations that we have champions. Specifically, I'm calling out Dr. Katie Plax, who goes ahead and starts to design and build some of what you're seeing, some of the content. So I don't know if they've addressed unintended consequences, but I do know that schools are considered in naming food banks. I'm not sure if there needs to be an amendment to it, but it's a good
Commissioner
point.
Packnett, would you like to add schools to this so coordination
Call it out
occurs?
Yeah, I think that would be good.
All right. So we have 3 additional accountable bodies to add here. Okay, with those amendments, we need a motion and a second. Okay, Commissioner Gore moves.
A second.
Commissioner Packnett makes a second. Additional discussion or questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And opposed? Okay. Now we're ready for Citizen Law Enforcement Relations call to action. So Commissioner Packnett and Commissioner Isom.
Right. Thank you. So before we kind of jump into the details of this, I want to provide an overview and narrate what this both is and is not. So you all heard earlier kind of our pillars or our tactical areas that we are paying attention to. What you are about to be walked through is a proposed model for the Commission's consideration that will address training around 3 of these pillars, not all of them, just 3. What I also want to name is this operating principle that's been discussed before, but this idea that we are not looking to what currently is, but what can, and I will say, quite frankly, must be, right? So obviously the status quo is what got us into this situation in the first place, and if we're really going to seize the opportunity to be a model for other communities, Baltimore, Cleveland, all of these other places that are dealing with the same issues, then we need to not be limited by what the current status quo is, what we can currently afford, what people currently have expertise in, what people currently care about, but actually push past that and make sure that we are moving forward to what can be. The other thing to remember is that what we are proposing, again, it only addresses training around 3 of these elements, and it is a baseline. I want to be very, very clear, it is a baseline. What we are presenting is a very basic package that we hope will be moved on immediately and taken into immediate action, because obviously this issue is of the utmost importance and urgency. But commenting on, or actually testifying to the president's task force, we asked the question of several senior law enforcement officers, if you had your ideal in terms of the number of hours, days, weeks, months you could spend training and re-educating your officers, in particular around anti-bias and cultural competency, but many, many different tactical pieces, how much time would you spend? And people were naming amounts of time as high in 3 and 4 weeks a year. And so what you see before you is a baseline, but we certainly hope that departments will take it upon themselves to actually increase the amount of time that they are spending re-educating officers. And so the model that we are going to propose this evening calls for a couple of things in an overview. One, it calls for the development of, is this it? No, the last one, yeah. It calls for a development of core curriculum and mandating tactical officer wellness and anti-bias training each year, and actually increasing the amount of mandatory hours that are currently spent by an additional 24 hours per year, which would total 120 hours in a 3-year reporting period. Again, we recognize that this would require additional funding, trainers of trainers' time and resources, but the demand for pushing past that status quo far outweighs the cost. And so that is what we are proposing this evening.
So the proposed training model is in 3 different areas, as Brittany indicated. The accountable body will be the Peace Officer Standards and Training, the Post Commission. This would apply to first-class counties with a charter form of governance in Missouri. That would be St. Louis City, St. Louis County, St. Charles County, Jefferson County, and also Jackson County. As you can see, in the area of tactical training and use of force, it would be 8 hours every year, and then 24 hours in a 3-year period. The same for anti-bias and cultural competency, and also for officer wellness. Currently, right now, POST requires 48 hours in a 3-year period. There is no mandated number of hours every year. So those 48 hours can be taken at the end of that 3-year period. Our recommendation would increase that to a total of 120 hours in a 3-year period. In addition to that, we have some specific areas that we wanted to focus on, at least give some direction in terms of what that training should look like. So for the tactical piece, we got input from community members, experts, and also from our working group and commission members as well. The tactical piece is important because we know that these skills need to be practiced. We know that these skills need to be reinforced. And if you don't do that, that they degrade over time. The importance of tactics is it gives opportunities for officers to make different decisions. It both protects officers and citizens alike. And so some of the areas that we think are important but not comprehensive of the training that should go into tactical training is that officers should be taught to do threat assessments and specifically dealing with people with behavioral health issues and mental health illness. This issue of training about time and space, meaning that scenarios in which officers have more time to make a decision. Scenarios where officers have the appropriate amount of space between themselves and a person that they're trying to control. Issues of cover, verbal command, calling for assistance, and backup element. In the paper today, Chief Belmer talked about this issue of a second man, and having a two-man car is often very helpful in controlling situations. Well, the same is true for backup. If you're a one-man car and you need assistance, if you call for backup, the outcomes oftentimes are a lot better when you have two officers as opposed to one officer. Considering tactical retreat and other tactical elements that might play into controlling a dangerous situation, and also defensive tactic skills, and looking at tactical tools, less than lethal tools that you might use, a taser, baton, etc. So the commission believes that this is something that police departments and police officers should do on a yearly basis, and that our recommendation is that police departments would have 8 hours of tactical training a year, and do that biannually in 2 4-hour segments, so they keep these skills up to date and refreshed. The second proposal also came out of community involvement. We had many experts in this field who came to our working group meetings, who gave us very good information about anti-bias training and learning on cultural competency. And we also wanted to make sure, as we talked about earlier, that this doesn't just focus on race, that we look at anti-bias in a more broader perspective: race, gender, age, ethnicity, sexual orientation or sexual identification. These are all areas that we need to focus on in terms of this training. Looking at bias, stereotypes, fair and impartial policing, unbiased behavioral responses, and also the implications of bias in terms of hiring, policies, and supervision. It was recommended that we have 8 hours of training in these areas every year as well. There was a recognition that all of us have biases and that we need to work at dismantling these biases, and there needs to be constant attention to doing this on a regular basis. The final area is a recognition that officers have a very difficult job, that they are confronted with very high stress, crisis situations and traumatic situations on a daily basis, and that there must be attention to officers' well-being as well. As you might expect, that if an officer's mental and physical health is not taken care of, then their professional performance will suffer. And so we believe that paying attention to officer wellness is very important, and these 3 pieces actually fit together very well. That we must pay attention to issues of stress, PTSD, addiction, how officers are giving them the skills and techniques to cope with stress, cope with difficult situations, promoting employee assistance programs, recognizing that the stress of the job and the things that officers have to deal with have impact on their family and their friends. Doing self-assessments and peer discussions are all important to officers' well-being, but more importantly to how they perform on the job. And so in the same vein, we recommended that there be 8 hours of training in this area every year as well. So these are the 3 recommendations that we have: tactical training, anti-bias training, and also officer wellness training. In each area, 8 hours are mandated a year, 24 hours for the 3-year period, for a total of 120 additional hours for law enforcement over a 3-year period. Any questions?
I do have a question concerning tactical training. Is there any truth to the, I've heard conflicting stories about this. If a policeman has to pull a gun, when he does it have to be fatal? Does he have to shoot to kill? Is that true?
So,
Like no shooting in the leg and the arm and that kind of thing to stop somebody. He has to shoot to kill somebody. Is that true? Is an officer trained to do that?
so officers are not trained to kill anyone. Officers are trained to stop the threat. In terms of law enforcement training in firearms, they're trained to shoot at center mass. The reason for that is that it's very difficult for anyone, any marksman, to be able to shoot someone in an arm or a leg. That's very difficult to accomplish. So they're not trained to shoot to kill. They're trained to stop the threat. But the way they're trained to do that is to shoot towards center mass.
So there were comment here and then
So there's no, so if a, I'm sorry. So if you're shooting at center mass, that means you're up here and you're going to be, it's going to be fatal.
So-
If that was trained, if that's what they're trained to do, right?
Right. So it is more likely to be fatal. But the comment that I will add to that is that there is a progression of use of force, or at least there should be. And so they're trained to do that when there's a deadly force encounter against them. Okay. So if it's not a deadly force encounter, then they're trained to use some other option, whether it's a baton, a taser, it could be hand-to-hand tactics. But that deadly force is only used in situations where there is a deadly force encounter with an officer, or they're trying to prevent deadly force from someone they're trying to protect. And to your point, shooting someone in the leg doesn't mean that they won't die. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but if you get shot, then it's potentially fatal no matter where you get shot. So I'll just add that point as well.
Can I just, and this is part of the reason why tactical tools and less than lethal tools are listed very specifically in the training standards that we want to have be mandatory through this model, right? Because what Commissioner Isom is discussing about this kind of scaffolded approach, right? So that you are not automatically going to your gun, but that you are using other tools that are non-lethal first, will require people being continuously trained on that, whereas right now that's not always happening. So that's one of the reasons why we've specified that. Hold on.
So can I ask, so if you want to increase the training, how does this help when, as a department, there's never really any accountability for what's happened? It's always about, I was in fear for my life. So if cops get the extra training, what does that do when cops are told or trained to cover their ass so that the police department doesn't get in trouble or doesn't look bad?
And so that's why I pointed out at the beginning that this training model only addresses 3 of the pillars, right? So there are 2 other pillars: accreditation, accountability, and policing standards, and civilian oversight, that go toward what you're talking about. And our next working group meeting is next Monday at 5 o'clock at UMSL, so please do attend, as we'll be going systematically through the rest of those pillars. There was, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I have one comment, and I've talked to many police officers, and it seems like maybe they need to be, a lot of them need to be retrained, because I have talked to police officers and higher up in the ranks of law enforcement that have actually told me they are trained to shoot to kill. So I'm getting these conflicting stories. Also, the 3 areas, the tactical, the anti-bias, and the officer wellness, I know what the recommendations are. What is it currently? How many hours are they currently spending in these areas?
So currently, there's 48 hours required in a 3-year period. Specifically, these areas are not required other than anti-bias or cultural competency. There's 3 years that are mandated in a 3-year period right now, currently, out of that 48 hours. But these specific areas, they are not specifically mandated. With the exception of anti-bias and cultural competency, there are 3 hours that are required.
One question about people that do not speak English. So I know a situation like in St. Anne, what happens, police person doesn't speak English, so a friend of mine, her husband, he's getting near 80. He's been doing this a long time. He volunteers at 2 in the morning. He goes out and he translates into Spanish for people. Have you, when you say that's not cultural competency, that you have a volunteer for over 10 years because you won't hire somebody to be on call to come in. And we cannot have children do these translations either, which they'll also do. You can't have a little kid translating and expect competency in determining investigations. So is there anything being looked at those that do not speak English and making, that could be also deaf, what can you make sure that in this competency that they are going to provide on call if it's after work hours? You know, that's especially the worst times. Thank you.
I have a question, Chief Eisen. If I were a policeman and I was on patrol and I told somebody to stop and hit the ground and they didn't do it and they reached for something in their belt area, what would you expect me to do? No, no, it's nothing to do with black or white. I mean, it's not. Whoever it is, if I'm a policeman and I say, please stop, please hit the ground, you're under arrest, and they don't do it, and they get up and they go to their belt or their pocket and they look like they're going to pull something out to shoot and kill me, what am I supposed to do?
Well, every situation is going to be different. What we're trying to do here is expose officers through training to different situations, so when they get in those situations, they might have other options. And so to make better choices or to make different choices. So every situation will be different, and there could be a lot of different elements. But we have to give officers and we have to train officers and give them the tools to make those decisions, okay? And tactical training is one way that provides officers more options.
Can we see if, maybe one more from the audience, and we'll see if any commissioners have questions.
Commissioner Isom, so that I am clear, I'm a counselor, and today I worked with a group of young black males, and one of the things they have asked me, matter of fact, it came up today in our group discussion, is, and I just want to be clear as to what I just heard you say, so that next time they ask me this, I can explain it correctly. They have asked, can't policemen, rather than shoot the first time to kill, can't they, you know, wound you or whatever, rather than just the first time they shoot to kill? Now, you just explained that they are trained to shoot center mass. And are you saying if they have a threat, so they're trained to do that the first time if they feel there's a threat?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, I just need you to explain it so I can explain it to them.
Let's go back to the first question. Are officers trained to shoot to kill? No. So officers are not trained to do that, okay? Are officers trained to shoot at the first threat? No. So officers are trained to respond to threats proportionally, right? And so if there is a deadly force threat against an officer or someone he's trying to protect, then they're authorized to use deadly force, okay? What we're trying to do here is make sure that officers have an opportunity to process that threat in a very tactical way, okay? And hopefully, if they're in a good position, it offers them the opportunity to do different things besides use deadly force, okay? So that's what we're trying to do. And that's a skill that needs to be practiced. Because when you're in a high-stress situation, you need to have practiced these skills to make those decisions.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see if commissioners have any questions. Commissioner Watson.
Commissioners, I was just wanting to know in terms of the first-class cities, as we know, a lot of our smaller municipalities don't fall in that, that category of classes of cities. Mainly the ones that are in that category are already accredited, as we already know. Is there any future plans, or is your committee looking at possibly including the second and third class cities, which in my opinion get no training close to what the accredited police departments get?
It's not first-class cities, it's first-class counties.
Okay.
With a, first-class counties with a charter form of government. So it would be every city within St. Louis County, St. Charles County, Jefferson
Okay.
County, and Jackson County.
Okay. Thank you for that correction. Thank you.
We have some more.
I'd like to know, what is post-traumatic growth? I just don't know what it means. Post-traumatic growth?
That's simply the healing process after experiencing a very traumatic incident.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
If Commissioner Gore, I want to make sure we get, respectfully, I just want to make sure commissioners have the opportunity to ask questions they need to ask, because they're being asked to act on this. So I want to make sure we give them that time to do so, and then we'll be able to come back. Commissioner Gore.
Is there, under officer wellness, would that be where you would consider the pay that officers receive, and whether or not officers are being compensated at a sufficient level, or would that be in a different area that we're not looking at today?
I mean, we're talking about training as it regards officer
Okay.
wellness right now, so it's just not currently pertinent.
Okay. Is that an issue that the group's going to consider?
It hasn't been brought up thus far, but.
Okay.
I had just one last one, Commissioners. I'm sorry. I thought I had finished. This last one, are we going to address the municipalities that, I just saw something recently on television that some of these municipalities can't even afford to buy weapons for these officers to actually go out on patrol. They have to buy their own weapons. They have to buy their own bulletproof vests. Are there standards that we're going to look at for these police departments to be able to have in order to call themselves a police department?
Well, we actually have other priority areas. This is just on the training piece. So in the other priority areas, we have accreditation, accountability, and there was another area. Oversight in that area.
Any other questions from commissioners? Okay. Take one community question. And just take the one, whatever was queued up next, so we can act and then move.
Can I just make an appeal? So we understand that this is, for a lot of us, what brought us here. And so I want to acknowledge that there are lots of thoughts and feelings and really excellent suggestions that we absolutely want to get into. That is why we've tried to really prioritize the working group time in particular. Understand that everybody can't make a Monday afternoon, but it's on the off weeks of the commission meeting, so it's at this same time next week at the University of Missouri St. Louis, where we go into the rest of these conversations to make sure that we're getting your suggestions and feedback for what we can be doing to implement a lot of these things. So I just want to make sure that if you're not able to comment today, that you might consider either attending next Monday or on future working group meetings, or submitting your thoughts online.
It's your choice, Sherika.
Yeah, this
Whoever
gentleman
you
right
go
here.
to
This
gets the
gentleman
question.
Right here.
In the hat.
In the hat.
In the hat.
The gentleman in the hat. So every department, in terms of officers' evaluation, psychological evaluation, is going to be different. There are a number of different things that you have to consider when you talk about psychological evaluations. A particular department policy, you have to look at the union contract with police departments. All of that has an impact. And so those areas are very specific to each police department. What we're trying to do here is give some intention to that through training and allow police officers and police departments to at least make officers aware that these can be issues in terms of their performance and address it on a regular basis so that if officers are experiencing problems in these areas, the hope is that they will seek out help.
And unfortunately, you and I both know, and as a counselor, I also know that a lot of people who do suffer from different psychiatric illnesses and stressful situations, so forth, will not reach out. So how, now I'm just wondering how is that based on, different police departments, how is that going to be handled? Because you can't trust that a person that's having a stressful situation wants to be stigmatized in that way and won't come out with it.
And that's something we hope to explore more in depth beyond the training piece in this officer wellness focal area. There are some recommendations that came from the President's Task Force that we'll be able to look at to say, is this the direction in which we want to move? And also you all's input in our working group sessions will be critical to that.
Good deal. Thank you very much for your questions and dialogue, and commissioners for yours as well. This comes forth from the working group and from our co-chair, so it doesn't require a motion and a second because it's coming out of committee, if you will. So we just ask all commissioners, you see the recommendation on the proposed model for law enforcement training standards. All those in favor, would you please notify by saying aye? Aye. All those opposed, nay? Any abstentions? Motion carries. We thank the co-chairs for their work on this particular proposal. We now move into an administrative portion of our meeting and are back in the hands of our managing director.
Thank you. I appreciate all those that continue to stay. It's an important part of our meeting. And to commissioners, I'd like to direct your attention to two lines of business. The first one is the Ferguson Commission budget. That will be on the screen momentarily. For commissioners, if you look in your packet, you do have the budget that is before you. Okay. So I'd like to direct your attention to the Ferguson Commission financial statements. These are prepared by United Way, who serves as our fiscal agent. These numbers are current through April 22nd of 2015. Again, as a reminder to commissioners and to the community, this budget reflects what was approved on January 10th of 2015. These financial statements are prepared on a cash basis, which means they do not include any pledged revenue or accounts payable. To date, as you can see in our revenue lines, we have secured $350,000 in total revenue, and we are grateful for the in-kind support that we've received from regional players, a little over $300,000. This brings our total revenue here to $668,957. We anticipate 2 additional funding streams that have been committed to the Ferguson Commission by the state of Missouri. And those 2 funding streams together total $775,000, which will bring our total revenue to $1.125 million. Just to be clear, these are block grant funds that will be recorded as revenue at the point in time that they are reimbursed, that they reimburse the commission for expenses that we have occurred. And we anticipate these funding streams to be able to come online in May. On the expense side of the budget, if you'll scroll down so everyone can see, our expenses currently to date total $191,537. And these are generated from payments in basically 3 categories: independent contractors, $42,445, and professional fees, $62,204. Operations, $4,504, and a 4th category, for community engagement that is required to support the commission public engagement structure. As you've seen tonight, that total is $82,383. So including the in-kind expenses, our total expenses to date are $510,494. This provides us with the balance currently of $158,462. So that's the overview. This is our financial statements, can be found as well on our website due to the Sunshine Law as well. Any questions, commissioners, on the budget to date? Okay, then as a second report, I'd like to pull up, please, the work plan to give both commissioners and the public a sense as to, at our midway point, how the commission, specifically the staff and independent contractors, plan the work over the next course of the few months. So, thank you. As it pulls up, again, these documents will be able to be found online. We are in the April timeframe, and so we've categorized our work in the following buckets. The official Ferguson Commission meetings, like what you're at tonight, working groups that are taking place in our community, the public engagement strategy that we'll be talking about shortly, what transition or translation implementation will look like. That fifth bucket is data and policy analysis, which is needed to make sure that we have this steeped in evidence-based work. And finally, the media and community engagement sessions. So what I like to do is to paint a picture that this looks at time from April through December. So in the Ferguson Commission meetings, we will move forward, continuing to bring and engage national models into the conversation. In May, we'll be focused on health policy and disparities. In June, again, we'll be highlighting these national best practices all the way through the submission of the report to ensure that we have talked to all that we need to and to ensure that our recommendations are well-rounded. On the working groups, they will continue, and it was just affirmed at the commission level, we will ask for each working group to please begin focusing now on models for development based on your recommendations for submission to the staff by or before or close to June 1. Moving forward from that, we will begin to design those first drafts of the initial report to the governor's office. Under the constraints of the commission, we have to work a backwards plan deadline. If a commission report is due September 15th, you in essence need to be writing it in June, July to be able to give ample time for community vetting. That's the public engagement piece. If anybody is surprised by what we say in September 15th, we have not done our job well. So we need to have plenty of time for feedback like tonight. Translation. Translation simply means all this is for naught if nothing happens after September 15th. So our strategy around translation is to begin now, thinking in parallel as the recommendations are being generated at our working groups to say who owns this work, who monitors this work, who funds this work, who collectively is accountable for this work. And so those answers need to be asked now, to begin to be answered now, so that as part of this report, we understand the path forward. I talked a little bit about data policy and analysis. It's a critical resource that the commission needs, and we are still in the process of engaging those resources. That should be online in May, right in time for this critical work. One thing that's missing that I will add to this as the commissioners approve this work plan is the need to address the racial equity lens to those recommendations. So we will add that bullet to the June timeframe under data and policy analysis. And then finally, engagement. It really is the core of the work that we have done. It's why we keep opening up for questions. It's why we keep extending the time for this type of engagement and input. So you will continue to see all the way through the course of the commission's work, time for feedback and engagement in the process, starting from the beginning of the inception through the submission of the report. Just to clarify as well, you do see October, November timeframe, and so the question is a very good one if you say what happens after September 15th. So some of the funding streams that we have are accountable bodies who need final reports. There will be other engagement, and people will ask lots of questions we'll need to answer. We think about translation after September 15th, that's another activity, and the United Way will need to keep all of the files for Sunshine Law requests for what, 5 to 7 years, I think, Danielle, on file. So all of that needs to transition very smoothly prior to the commission's sunset. So with that, I present this to the commissioners for input and also for affirmation so that we can put this on our website as well. Any questions?
We received this as an operating update and report. Doesn't require, of course, action from the body. but we appreciate the work that's been done by the staff team and also the intentionality about making sure that the path forward is very transparent for the community. And so as we prepare to close on tonight, we do so with earnest thoughts and considerations of what's going on across our country. We do so with thanks to all of you for the commitment of your time, your intellect, and sharing on tonight. And for many of you, for your continued engagement throughout the process. We are becoming perhaps some at least friends in this process, folks that we continue to see and engage. We illustrating this kind of commitment to community. We thank the commissioners for your dedication of time, not just in these spaces, but of course in working group spaces, and the realities that this means that you're living much more public lives than you were before October and November, and you have all kind of recommendations and advice and counsel that you're getting all over and everywhere you go. So thank you for allowing people to stop you in Deerbergs and Schnooks in the mall to tell them what you should be doing on the commission. We invite all of you as we close on tonight. A couple of things we are inclined to do. Number one, we always close with a bit of silence, just to center ourselves for the work ahead. I'll also invite you as you transition on today to connect with someone that you do not know. Just look around the room. There may be somebody still. You may have to look all the way on the other side to find someone that you do not know. Just say hello, introduce yourself, thank them for coming out, make a different kind of connection if you would on tonight. And so I'll invite you to stand as we center and prepare to go. I'll invite you in your time. We're not directed in this time, but I'll just offer to you, perhaps as you spend this time in centering and the silence, to send positive thoughts, and if you are so inclined, prayers to our friends who are in Baltimore, who are in Nepal, and who are visited by tragedy, both human and natural, throughout our nation and our globe. So I invite you to a moment of centering as we go. With thanks to our host here at the Y, the Greater St. Louis YMCA, we are now adjourned. Remember, meet somebody.